143 by cureduckz. Summary. Asha promised Aster she'd protect him. Aster promised Asha he'd protect her. Even if they didn't say it out loud, they promised to love each other. When the time has come, it's time for them to make that promise come true, or a take on Magnifico and Amaya's defeat if they went with the original wishes concept. To say that the last few hours have not been what Asha had in mind would be an understatement, and the last few hours have not been what Asha had in mind the moment she woke up the previous morning. Though in fairness, that was a thought that could easily spread to the rest of Roses. After all, it's not every day that one discovers that those royals so admired by all were ambitious people whose only goal was unearned adoration, a product of longing for a wish that might never come true, and not if the whim of their majesties suggested it. And a part of Asha feels horrible for not asking Dahlia how she feels after learning that Magnifico had disappointed her too much. She does. But the other part of her, that tiny selfish part that got her here in the first place, can barely concentrate. Not when her attention is fixed on the figure in front of her. Not that she can concentrate on anything else either. With the way the body, as bright as the sun, twinkles with the force of a fire helpless in the wind, prone to go out at any moment. It doesn't help at all that with every blink the shape she observes changes, constantly switching between a human figure and a star, literally a star. However, the only thing that remains unperturbed are the muscles in his face, contorted in pain, as if the simple fact of shape-shifting generates some physical pain, but at the same time he is unable to stop himself. Aster, she tries to speak, the noise emanating from his throat ragged and quivering and barely audible over the cheering of the people of the realm as they regain their desires, but not Asha. Asha, who never made a wish because it was not her time yet, and both Saba and Mama had already gotten theirs back. Asha, who might as well be watching as her wish seemed to fade and recede further and further away. Aster! The simple gesture seemed to be enough to get his attention, and soon his eyes met Asha's. Were it not for the circumstances in which they find themselves, they would think that the sparkle in each other's orbs makes them look beautiful. Ha! A condescending laugh echoes over the hustle and bustle, and amid the panic Asha recognizes the voice of the queen from her magical prison. That voice whose love had vanished so as not to leave even a shell of it. You can beg all you want, you can wish all you want, but it's useless to this point. Thanks to you, the wishes will never come true. Ironic, isn't it? Magnifico's voice continues, and the king needs no effort to disguise the coldness in it. All your effort, all this nonsense, simply because you wanted to save the wishes of Roses. That was our job, our purpose as king and queen, but you wanted to play the savior, and look what happened. The wishes are unprotected, and the star that made them possible is fading. Asha shakes her head, almost dragging her aching body towards them. No, not towards the body, towards Aster. To speak of him as a body is synonymous with affirming Magnifico and Amaya's charlatanry, and affirming Magnifico and Amaya's charlatanry is synonymous with ceding them an undeserving victory. It also had into the way they talked about him as an object in past tense, as something that is simply no longer present. Giving up means expressing that they are right. Aster deserves better than that. It is with that resolve that Asha begins to move, ignoring her aching body and the glass clicks of magic unraveling. If that was what it was, just like the rest of Rosis, she was not as knowledgeable as her royal highnesses, ignoring the voices of said royal highnesses as they attempt to mock her, ignoring the voices of her family and friends, becoming less and less distant. Ignoring all that and more, her attention remains focused on Aster, who at no point has taken his eyes off of her, even if his glow does seem to tinkle out every second. Aster is going to be okay. She's not even sure if the wind can carry her words as she says them in a ludicrously low volume, but at least her friend's eyes seem to open a bit out of his grimace of pain, as if he was able to read her lips, or at best to have heard her. "You're going to be okay." At that moment, Astor's expression twists again, pain and uncertainty marking his features as if he were unable to believe her. However, to be honest, even Asha can't believe herself. "It's okay." Astor begins to sign, and it would be encouraging if it weren't for the acceptance shining behind his eyes. "You're safe, and that's all that matters. I said I would protect you at all costs, and I did." "No." "No," she whispers as she finally reaches for Astor and takes one of his hands in hers. The shimmering she had grown accustomed to was beginning to fade, and a sickly coldness was beginning to take over. It was clear the dark magic was still wreaking havoc on him, even if the threat had faded. Or not in the way she expected. If she looked closely enough, she could see grains of apparent green sand clinging to his skin. Asha swallowed. "Don't say that. We're going to help you." They had to. The star had always been there, so close yet so distant, that support that the monarchs were rumored to have countered on to help Rosis, which, of course, was just another lie, something to cover their ambition for the star itself and use its wishes to... That's right, wishing star. How could she not think of that? A part of her, however, knew why she refused to think of that. "Aster," she called once more, noting longingly how a pair of amber eyes stared at her as if she were the only person in the world. "You know I don't like doing this. I don't want to exploit what little magic you have left." She had done that enough as she danced through the skies. "But I need you to grant me one wish." Aster blinked and seemed to want to say something, but he also made no great effort to move his hands, still incapacitated in Asha's, seeming to be focused on avoiding shape-shifting once more. Carefully, she moves her other hand to Aster's cheek and caresses it, hoping her warmth will reach him once more. "I wish you to be well. I wish for the darkness to leave you, for you to be yourself again, that funny, sweet boy I danced with among the clouds." Okay, that was more than one wish, but she hoped the message got through to him. "I promise myself I'll protect you. Please, don't make me break that promise." Aster's eyes widened a little more, as if they were beginning to weigh, both ignoring at the same time how his light seemed to go out a little more. In the distance, Asha was sure she began to hear Dahlia's voice arguing with the king, Gabo, trying to stop her. "As long as the dark magic is still here, the royals will be too," a voice murmured, but they were both too distracted by the other to see who it was. However, if at no time she had been able to look away from the star, she doubted she could do so now. Even if her best friend was nearby, a message that was being transferred, if she was being granted a space with Aster. For her part, Aster just smiled, and boy, was his smile still as cute as she remembered it. She watched regretfully as he began to lift his remaining hand. She wanted to stop him, unable to stand how he used what little energy he had left on her and not her wish. But she didn't want to be as selfish as Magnifico and Asha. It was thanks to that they were in this situation. in the first place. Instead, she watched as he rested a gentle hand against her face, stroking his thumb across her cheekbone, being then that Asha noticed the wetness running across the area, before he began to gently tap it with his finger 1 time, 4 times, 3 times. Asha blinked, this time feeling the fat tears descending to Aster's face, his smile as warm as his presence stretched toward her. Amidst the sweet tingling, a glow had taken place on the opposite cheeks, and the grip on her hands grew stronger. I love you too, she whispered, feeling her voice finally finish breaking. It was clear that her wish would not be granted. Aster had been using his remaining spark to help them face the royalty, to dance with her, and his brief contact with corruption had finished eating away at him. But at least she wanted to be sure to let her longing, her affection for him reach him. Fairy tales always spoke of kisses to seal love stories, and even if this one wouldn't end as Asha had hoped, or wasn't something she wished with before facing this whole ordeal, she at least wanted to indulge herself for once. And she kissed Aster, which was definitely not like what Ash had planned. To be fair, she had never questioned what it would be like to kiss a star, but now, as she began to stroke the hair of one, she knew this was better than any tale. Asha felt like she was touching the sun or caressing a cloud, and spending time with Aster had helped her know what that was like. As her hair cascaded over them, bestowing a certain hint of intimacy between them, the feeling was multiplied tenfold when Aster's lips, awkward and shy, found themselves returning the gesture, and hand on her cheekbone was still drumming against his cheek. 1, 4, 3. 1, 4, 3 was a certain desperation in the message, one that she could certainly reciprocate. The sudden fiery touch was not something she expected, though, and she pulled away from Aster as quickly as he came, even if it seemed to cause her no pain. Asha had to blink to regain her vision when a strong light made her see white dots. Yet she blinked again to make sure she was seeing properly. In front of her, Aster burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns. And considering the sun was a star, it certainly made sense to think too much of it. Still, that held little weight for Asha as she sighed, a surprised smile spreading across her face. Aster exhaled, as stunned as she was, noting the delight, how the pain seemed to fade from his body. But how did... She spoke, unable to form a coherent sentence. From a distance she could hear the queen's voice slowly fading away, but both Amaya and Magnifico had already taken up the least amount of space in her worries. The feeling seemed to be mutual because he laughed silently, sparks once again invading his eyes in that gaze she had learned to adore. It looks like you got your wish, Aster remarked, but that was as little as she could do as she hugged him tightly, holding his back to help him sit up. They were both laughing, both sobbing, and even if Asha was the only one to be heard, she didn't need to see his face to recognize the body language, not after the lovely memories they'd made together. After all, he was right. Their dream had come true, and now they could shape their new dreams together. End of story.